Get out of here, you demon brat. Stop gawking at my masks. You'll scare away all my customers. The mask seller, a man whose heart was as shriveled as his old peeling skin, thrust a small wooden mask directly into the boy's chest, pushing Naruto to the ground. But I just wanted to look. This one, it's got big ears just like a fox. Fox, you say? You're better suited for a demon mask. Now scram before I call the Uchiha police force on you. The vendor's words were laced with venom, prejudice, and they struck deeper than any physical blow could to Naruto. He felt so vulnerable. He felt the prick of tears in his eyes. He was never sure why. Why did some adults always look at him with such hatred? Why did they whisper about demons when he was around? He was just Naruto. He was just him. And he was trying so hard to be good. We hear the sound of heavy stone footsteps. Wham, wham, wham. What seems to be the trouble here, old man? The mask seller froze, his eyes widening in both recognition and fear as he looked up, towering over the stall. Dressed in pristine white robes, robes that labeled him as the Hokage, was Minato Zenin, the fourth Hokage. But today, he was just the clan head of the Zenin, and the father of the boy on the ground who had lost his mother. Lord Hokage, my apologies. This child was causing a disturbance. A disturbance? Or was he simply looking at your wares? I saw you push him. The masked seller would gulp. No. Oh, Kage. He stumbled? Is that so, Naruto? Did you stumble? Naruto would sniff, looking up towards Minato. No, father, he pushed me and called me a demon. Minato's eyes, normally a calm blue, would harden into chips of ice, the air around him dropping several degrees. The masked seller trembled visibly. I see. Selling masks are we, huh? Maybe you'd prefer to sell them from a prison cell for a few weeks. Maybe a year. To reflect on how you treat the son of the Hokage and the grandson of Nabito Zenin of this village. No, no, Hokage, please. I didn't mean it, I swear. Good. Then perhaps a formal apology to my son, and a promise to never again speak to him with such disrespect would be a good start. Otherwise, and I assure you, your stall will be gone tomorrow, and so will you. The masked seller, pale and shaking, would turn to Naruto. I am truly sorry, young master. Please forgive my insolence. Naruto, while still a bit dazed, would just stare. He wasn't used to adults being so afraid of him or to apologize to him so quickly. It felt odd. Their tone was so forced and tight. Minato would speak. Get up, Naruto. His father would reach down, forcing his arm onto his son's and pulling him up from the ground. We Zeni do not allow ourselves to be pushed around by commoners, especially not by those who've forgotten their place. Understand? Naruto would wipe his nose, defiance entering his voice. Yeah, Dad. He was just a weakling anyway. Not like he could even stop me if he wanted to take all his masks. Minato would chuckle, a rare low sound, placing the hand back on Naruto's head. That's my boy. Now, about that fox mask you wanted. Minato Zenin would pull out a pouch of Ryo, paying for the mask that Naruto desired. He'd buy the fox mask, and as they walked away, Naruto would clutch it, a small, proud smirk replacing the tears he had earlier. It was a moment that perhaps solidified something for him. This world. It was split between the strong and the weak. The strong, like his father, were able to make the rules. He was a Zenin. He was the strong. And the weak would simply have to obey him. After all, he was the Hokage's son. From here, years will pass. Naruto grows not just in stature, but in his confidence, or perhaps we should say, overconfidence. Whispers of the Ninetales never truly faded, but within the Zenin compound. Under watchful, demanding eyes from his grandfather Nabito and his father Minato. Naruto was shielded and simultaneously forged into a prodigy. Even among the Zenin, he was renowned, for he was born with the terrifying power that made Minato known as the Yellow Flash. The Kekkei of projection sorcery. A technique that allowed him to divide 1 second into 24 frames of time, setting motions into a 24th frame, and forcing his targets to follow those movements or be frozen for an entire second. We'd hear the rustling of papers, kids chattering, and murmurs. In the Konoha Academy classroom, Naruto was an enigma. The village saw him as a privileged, arrogant brat who relied on his clan's power to get by, while his classmates saw a rival, and a genius, and an insufferable pain in the rear. "Naruto, are you even listening?" Aruka would say exasperatedly. In the Ninja Academy classroom, Aruka would rub his temples, staring at the blonde boy slouched in his chair, who would have a bored smirk on his face. "Yeah, of course, Aruka-sensei. You were just droning on about the proper way to make a clone jutsu, wasn't it? What a waste of time." Laughters would echo around the room, a few snickers, and of course a few groans from their classmates, specifically Shikamaru. "It's fundamental, Naruto." And stop with the smart remarks. Sakura would speak, whispering to Eno, "He's such a pig, always talking about himself." To her right, the dark-haired and also prodigy would mutter under his breath. "Annoying. Huh. What was that, Sasuke? Did you say something? Or were you just grunting like a wild boar again? I can never tell with you, Chiha. All your scowls and no substance. That's why all of you are dead." "What did you say, Zenin?" Sasuke would stand, slamming his hands into his desk, furious. "That's enough, both of you. Sasuke, sit down. Naruto, I will not tolerate you antagonizing your classmates. This is an academy, not your home. You must respect your classmates." Naruto would roll his eyes. He's leaning back. "Oh, lighten up, sensei. It's just a bit of friendly banter. Though I suppose some people are too dense to appreciate it. Especially the ones who can't even tell a basic genjutsu from a real illusion." His eyes would flick to Sakura, who would flush crimson. Naruto was referencing an earlier session where Sakura had struggled in genjutsu. "Naruto, that's not fair. Don't bring that up. Life isn't fair, princess. Just haven't learned that yet. Now, if you'll excuse me, my stomach says it's time for lunch. And I have no desire to listen to more of your..." His eyes would look up and down Aruka, squawking. Naruto would roughly push his chair back, walking out of the classroom. "Naruto, get back here," Aruka would shout. But Naruto was already out the door, a trail of exasperation and annoyance left in his wake. The bell would ring, and students would file out. Later, by the training grounds, they'd find Naruto practicing, his movements fluid, precise, and impossibly fast. He darted between training posts in a blur of motion, each strike so impossibly accurate. It was like they weren't even looking at reality. The sound of rapid, precise movements we hear. Whoosh, 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 thwack, thwack, as Naruto whacked the training post. As he hit harder, Naruto would speak to himself. Too slow. Always too slow. Naruto's cousin, another member of the Zenin clan, was a year older and the same age as Rock Lee and Neji. Would finally catch up to Naruto, screaming, "Naruto, wait up, come on." His sweat would drip from his brow. He was a decent shinobi, but nothing compared to Naruto. He was like a tortoise. "Naruto, you're going too fast." The blonde-haired boy would smirk, wiping his own sweat. "Exactly. That's the point, isn't it? If you can't see me, you can't touch me. And if they can touch me, well, then they'll become a pretty still life for a second, which would be more than enough time for a decisive blow." He'd throw a punch out. It's called perfection. Naruto would continue demonstrating his incredible ability, phasing through a series of hand signs with incredible speed. Starting towards a training dummy. Wind style Gale Palm. Using projection sorcery, Naruto had turned each hand seal into a frame, causing his hand seals to be almost instantaneous. Before launching a wind style attack to destroy the dummy. Naruto's cousin would sigh. So incredible. Miyato must be very proud. Something unreadable would flicker in Naruto's eyes. Proud. He expects nothing less. And grandfather, even more so. You know, they say I'm a prodigy. Naruto would gulp. Even though I'm only a halfling. But I guess her Uzumaki blood doesn't slow me down too much. At least compared to you, Tobio. Ha. His cousin would say. But what about the Ninetales? Do they ever? We don't talk about that. That night is. It's for the ignorant commoners to cling to. It has nothing to do with my abilities. Nothing to do with me. I'm a Zenin through and through. Don't you forget it. His cousin would fall silent. He knew better than to push Naruto on that topic. His bravado was a shield, thick and impenetrable. But that was just Naruto. Finally, the day had come. The day of Genin team selections. Naturally, Naruto would pass, being the talented prodigy and son of the cage that he was. The classroom seemed to hum with anticipation. Everyone was excited and, more so, desperate to be placed on a powerful team, a strong team, to prove their own worth. Naruto, however, simply watched the room with detached amusement. What's there to worry about? You guys are either on my team or you're a loser. The door would open as Iruka enters, clearing his throat. All right, everyone, settle down. Now I have our team assignments. Iruka beginning to read the names. Naruto would tune out, only listening for his own. And Team 7, Sakura Haruno. Oh, please don't put me on a team with that guy. Sasuke Uchiha. Sakura would think, yes, Sasuke's with me. And Naruto Zenin. No, why? Why him? It was so close, Sakura would think, complaining internally. A collective groan would echo throughout the class. Sakura, for the matter, looked like she'd been punched. Sasuke would have a scowl deepen. But Naruto would simply grin, a glint in his eyes. Well, well, well. Looks like the world has a sense of humor after all. Sticking me with the brooding orphan and his fangirl. This'll be fun. Sakura would stand. Fun. You're so insufferable, Naruto. Oh, why do I always have to get stuck with you? Because, Sakura, you have the incredible ability to wind up on the team with the strongest member of the academy. You should consider it a gift, really. Being in the right place in the right time and all that. Don't bother, Sakura. He's not worth the effort. Naruto's eyes would narrow at Sasuke's comment. Oh, is that so, Chiha? Planning on proving your superiority again. Last I checked, your Sharingan couldn't even keep up with my movements. Oh, wait? He'd smirk. The rage bait would definitely get to Sasuke. That's right. Unlike me, you haven't unlocked your family's special Kekigenka yet. Isn't that right, you little fake Uchiha? Iruka would bang on the front desk. That's enough, all of you. Your Jonin will be arriving here shortly. Please try to act professional for your sensei and not like a band of squabbling children. Naruto would simply chuckle like he was imitating the laugh of Minato from all those years ago. This was going to be very interesting. He was excited. He wanted to show everyone, especially the two new members of his team, just how far above them he truly was. As time would pass, Naruto would start to get a little annoyed. Where is this sensei of ours? Everyone else has already been picked up. It's getting annoying. Sasuke would laugh. Can't make the time go by faster with your fancy projection style. Shut it, Sasuke. As if on cue, the sound of a door opening could be heard, breaking the attention of all three Genin toward the door. A tall, silver-haired man with a relaxed posture would enter, and one of his eyes would be covered by his leaf shinobi headband. This was Kakashi Hate. My first impression of you guys, huh? You are all a bunch of annoying brats. Well, let's meet up on the roof, okay. Just like that, Kakashi would turn to a puff of smoke, vanishing. Naruto would grin. What a theatrical entrance. I like this guy already. Though, he'll need to pick up his pace if he wants to keep up with me, he'd smirk. Sakura and Sasuke would roll their eyes simultaneously. Now on the rooftop, the three would face their new Jonin sensei, Kakashi Hate. Alright, everyone, introductions. First, tell me your name, your likes, dislikes, your dreams for the future. Oh, and Blondie, you're first. Naruto would cross his arms, an irritated smirk playing across his face. Name's Naruto Zenin, son of Minato Zenin. Assuming you've heard of him, Hokage and all, and the grandson of the war hero Nabito Zenin. What I like, huh? I haven't been asked that in a while. Maybe a good challenge. Ooh, I don't mind a spot of ramen every now and then. Oh, and Haidai Sakura. I like when girls know their place. My dislikes. I hate weaklings. Anyone who questions me, really. And a dream, huh? I guess it wouldn't hurt to become the strongest Hokage who's ever lived, surpassing my old man, and bringing glory to my name. Finishing that line off, he'd sit back confidently. Sakura would look aghast, shocked that this kid had the audacity to speak like this. Sasuke's expression would remain impassive, but his grip would tighten around his knife, his kunai that he had been spinning. Kakashi would simply blink with his one single visible eye. Right. That's interesting. Well then, Pinky, you're next. Sakura would blush, glancing towards Sasuke. Oh, me. Wow. Her eyes would bat at Sasuke. She'd giggle. My likes are. Oh, my dislikes are Naruto. My dream is. She'd look over at Sasuke, her eyes batting it once again. And my hobbies are. Kakashi would sigh. You like a certain someone. You dislike Naruto. Fair. Your dream is to stare at a certain someone, and your hobbies are giggling. Got it? All right, emo kid, it's your turn. Sasuke would turn his eyes darkly. My name is Sasuke Uchiha. I have many dislikes and a few likes. And I dream, no. My ambition is to restore my clan. He'd look and eye Naruto over and to kill a certain man. Naruto would snort, interrupting Sasuke's speech. How edgy. Honestly, Uchiha, you and your little vengeance are gonna get yourself killed. How tiresome, just grew up already. If I had an older brother who'd spare me and killed the rest of the weaklings, I'd even forgive him. Shut it, Zenin. Kakashi would intervene. All right. What a lovely team dynamic we've got going here. Well, I'm sure this won't lead to any problems tomorrow. Speaking of tomorrow, we'll have a survival exercise. Make sure to bring your ninja tools and any preparations for combat you might need. Oh, and don't eat any breakfast, or you'll definitely be throwing up. And just like before, Kakashi would vanish once again, completely turning into a puff of smoke and vanishing from the trio. Sakura would be the first to break the silence. What was that about not eating breakfast? He's so weird. I guess he's not as bad as Naruto, though. Naruto would stretch, ignoring her comment. Probably just a test to see if we're gullible enough. Or maybe he just doesn't want to see your pretty face covered in vomit, Sakura. That's not even something I'd want to see on a girl as pretty as you. Sakura would try her best not to gag. You are just impossible. And you're predictable, Naruto would say. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some real training to do. Unlike some people, I won't waste my time dreaming about vengeance or chasing after brooding pretty boys. It actually, spoilers, takes work to be strong. Naruto would leap off the rooftops, landing gracefully several stories below, before sprinting away in a flash. Leaving Sakura in her frustration and Sasuke silently seething in wrath. That's Zenin. He's such a brat, Sasuke would say. The next morning would come quickly. At the designated training ground, near the forest, Naruto would arrive, a confident swagger in his step. Sakura and Sasuke, though, were already there, looking a bit worse for wear, having likely eaten nothing following Kakashi's instructions. Naruto, however, had enjoyed a hearty breakfast made by his family chefs, knowing that Kakashi's warning was merely talk. The birds were chirping in the morning air, and a gentle breeze would push Sasuke's hair over his face. As he brushed it aside, Kakashi would appear in front of them, yawning as he held a book out in front of himself, appearing out of nowhere. Good morning, Team 7. Looks like you all made it. Though, Naruto, you look suspiciously well fed. Naruto would grin. Well, sensei, I believe a sharp. Her mind and a full stomach are essential for peak performance. Unlike some of my less observant teammates, Sakura would glare as her stomach would rumble. Sasuke, though, would merely narrow his eyes. Kakashi would just shake his head. Well, today's exercise is simple. You need to take these 2 bells from me by noon. If the 3 of you can't, you fail. And you go back to the academy. Oh, and did I add that only 2 of you can pass? He'd hold up 2 silver bells, jingling them in his hands. Naruto's eyes would fixate on the silver bell, glamoring in the morning light. This was it. This was his chance to show off. He'd crack his knuckles intimidatingly. Only 2 bells, huh? Well, I guess that means either the fangirl or the emo's going back to school. And my money's on the fangirl. She's useless after all. Hey, what's that supposed to mean, Naruto? That's not true at all, Sakura would say, her eyes filling with rage. Begin, Kakashi would start, and immediately, Sasuke and Sakura would vanish into the tree line, hiding for cover. Just as they'd been instructed to. Naruto, however, would stand his ground. There's no way I'm gonna hide from this guy. I'll be confronting Kakashi head-on. You 2 cowards can sit back and watch a real shinobi at work. So, Kakashi-sensei, I heard you were pretty strong. Let's see if that's just a rumor. I'm not one for hide and seek, so come and get me. Or rather, Naruto would scratch his cheek, his whiskers moving along with his fingernail. How about I come and get those bells from you? Kakashi would try his hardest not to laugh. Bold, aren't we? Just like your father. But you know, arrogance can be a dangerous thing, Naruto. In a blur, Kakashi moved. Naruto, however, was even faster. His projection style kicking in. He divided the exact second of Kakashi's movement, anticipating and setting his own trajectory. And just like that, the battle would begin. Whoosh, thwack, whoosh. As Naruto's fists would engage with Kakashi's, they'd have a lightning-fast battle between 2 taijutsu masters. Naruto would dart forward, a fist aimed at Kakashi's midsection. At his green Chunin vest, but Kakashi would block. Naruto would already be following up with a kick set to hit directly into Kakashi. However, Kakashi, who would try to block, would be momentarily caught off guard by the Kikagenkai, freezing him into a frame, a panel. Of that instance, his body refused to obey him. Naruto would grin, delivering a soft tap to Kakashi's shoulder with his foot. Catcha. This freezing effect only lasted a second, but it was enough. Naruto had already demonstrated his terrifying power. Power and precision. Kakashi surprisingly even looked a little impressed. Not bad, Naruto. Not bad at all. Truly a chip off the old block, as they say. But still predictable. Kakashi would vanish again, this time reappearing behind Naruto with a kuna by his throat. Speed isn't everything. Tactics and teamwork are just as important. Naruto, though caught off guard, would still smile arrogantly. Teamwork, huh? That's for those who can't stand on their own. As for those tactics, I'm just getting started. This is only the beginning, Kakashi. You haven't seen anything yet. The bells, for now, remained with Kakashi, but the challenge had been set. Naruto, while arrogant, was ready to prove himself. A few hours later, it was finally lunchtime. Sasuke and Sakura had begun working the lesson of teamwork together through their own hunger and desperation. But now, he almost felt bad. Himself and Sasuke would both be eating their lunches, while Sakura was tied to the stump, the only one who hadn't managed to touch a bell, and thus had performed the worst, while the other two enjoyed their meal. This time, Sasuke would be the first one to reach out, giving Sakura with his own chopsticks pieces of his own lunch. Sasuke would look annoyed. Why are you feeding that failure? She was the one who performed the worst. Didn't you hear what Kakashi-sensei said? Sasuke would still continue to ignore Naruto. Naruto would grunt. Uchiha, didn't you hear what Kakashi said? If he catches us feeding her, then all 3 of us will fail. Sasuke's eyes would narrow at Naruto. Then I'd rather fail. I'm not gonna leave her here to starve just because you had breakfast this morning. Sakura would blush. This has been one of the nicest things Sasuke had ever said, or one of the only things he had said to her. Naruto would sigh, scratching the back of his head. Well, I guess we should work together. If he comes back, and you're still feeding her, it could cause me problems. Naruto would stand, reaching his own chopsticks out to Sakura. But her face would turn sour. She had enjoyed sharing chopsticks with Sasuke, but this guy. She'd look worriedly at Sasuke. Sasuke would nod, though with some apprehension, and she'd take a bite. At that moment, Kakashi would run out, saying, You. Naruto looked like he was about to pass out. Oh, he blew it. You all pass. What? Naruto would fall back. But what about the exam? We didn't pass. Kakashi would chuckle. Well, at least you showed me that you're capable of teamwork. And with that, Team 7 would have officially been formed. Following that would be weeks of D-rank missions, catching cats, pulling weeds, and painting fences. For him, for Naruto, it was an insult. Finally, the breaking point would arrive, and he'd march to his father's office. He'd boldly push both doors open, interrupting the work of those in the office, and yell out in a confident tone. Dad. And Old Man Third, Sartobi. Enough of this farce. I didn't spend my entire childhood mastering the most complex and powerful technique in the Leaf Village, just to find a cat for the 20th time. Minato would sigh, putting his own face in his hands. You know, Naruto, patience is also a virtue of the shinobi. Patience is for the slow. If you're not gonna give us a real mission, I might just leave this village and find something worth my time to do. Or maybe I'll go visit grandfather. At least he understands that my talent isn't to be wasted. Hiruzen would chuckle. He has his grandfather's tongue, Minato. Ah, I remember those days. Myself, Danzo, and Nabito. Very well. I suppose we can assign a C-rank mission. In fact, we have one perfect for Team 7. You will be escorting a master bridge builder back to his home in the Land of Waves. The sound of footsteps would fill the open air. Birds chirping once again as the journey would begin. Naruto confidently walking in front, not to scout, but because he was refusing to walk behind a lowly civilian like Tazuna. This common bridge builder that he was assigned to protect. Tazuna would make a grunting sound as he took a swig from the miscellaneous bottle in his hand. What's with the blonde brat? Looks like he hasn't seen a day of work in his entire life. Naruto, without looking back, would say, Careful, old man. Your breath smells like cheap booze and failure. You're lucky that our village accepts commissions from such unrefined individuals. Naruto, you can't speak to him like that. He's our client, Sakura would say in a hissing and undertone voice. He's a paycheck, Sakura, and a noisy one at that. Stay in your lane, which, if I recall, is 3 paces back. That way. Behind the old drunkard. Sasuke would whisper behind both of them. You talk too much, and you're wide open. Am I? Naruto would step in a puddle, though, surprisingly, the weather had been completely clear that morning. Suddenly, 2 chains would whip out from the puddle, wrapping around Kakashi, and shredding him instantaneously. Or so it seemed. Kakashi-sensei. Sakura would scream in fear. The demon brothers of the mist, Chunin, would pivot out from the puddle toward Naruto and Tazuna. They moved incredibly fast. But to Naruto, it was like they were stuttering. First frame, you leap. 12. Your chain will extend. And 24, you freeze as you die. A sound would split the air like a camera shutter. Naruto wouldn't even weave a single sign. He simply moved. One moment, he was standing next to Tazuna, and in the next, he was behind the first brother. The assassin froze in midair, his body locked in a rigid, unnatural square. As if though a block of ice had turned him into a shard of glass. His only thoughts would be, why can't I? I can't move. Naruto would lean in close during this second, whispering, you failed. Trash. You didn't follow the movement I chose for you. And now you'll fulfill your role as scum. Naruto would throw a left hook charged with chakra, the heavy punch slamming into the frozen target and shattering the panel. With this casual strike, the frame would shatter, sending the brother sprawling into a tree, as his body would land like a marionette, whose strings had been cut. Sasuke would intercept the second, but the difference between their combat was clear. Sasuke needed effort to take this guy down, while it seemed second nature for Naruto. Kakashi would reappear, clapping for both of his students as they had taken out two Chunin-level threats. Very impressive, Naruto and Sasuke. Sakura, good job protecting Tazuna, while the other two were focusing on combat. That was an excellent display of teamwork. Although accidental, Naruto would simply click his tongue. Yeah, whatever. And eventually, they'd come to reach the land of waves. The place was choked by fog. They could barely see even 10 feet in front of them, and fear clung to the place. Not that Naruto could feel it. He had been trained to remove this feeling of fear. Even as a thick, murderous chakra began to saturate the air, he merely would adjust his collar. Suddenly, the sound of a massive metal blade would slice through the air. Shh, the whack. Kakashi would yell out, "Get down." A giant metal cleaver, the executioner's blade, would slam into the tree that had been right near where their heads had been. And standing atop its handle was Zabuza. Zabuza Momoki, the demon of the hidden mist. Well, I can't mistake that hair anywhere. It sticks out in the bingo book like a sore thumb. You're Kakashi of the Sharingan. Oh, and what's this? His eyes would sweep down to Naruto, a brat with the Zenin crest. I had heard the fourth Hokage clan was a bunch of prideful bastards, but sending a child to a slaughterhouse is certainly a bold move. A slaughterhouse. I agree. Though I think you've mistaken who the butcher is, you eyebrowless freak. Naruto, get back. This isn't like the last ones, Sakura would warn. Hey, Sakura, do me a favor, and find a sturdy tree to hide behind. Usually, this went to the capable. Zabuza would not lose this opportunity. He'd laugh. Vanishing into the mist. His voice would echo all around them. Hidden mist jutsu. Now, which one shall I strike down first? Naruto would stick his fingers in his ears. You're so loud. All that chakra through the mist, it's like a strobe light. You're moving too fast for even my frames to keep up with. Naruto began tapping the ground in a constant rhythmic pattern with his feet. Tap, 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 tap. Cap. Naruto didn't use the Sharingan. He didn't need to. He would simply project his intent into the mist itself. He'd move his own body into bursts of 1/24th of a second, appearing in 3 different locations at once to the naked eye. What? Are they clones? Is that the body flicker technique? Well, I'll give you that you're fast. Naruto would interject. I'm not just fast, you peasant. I'm consistent. We hear the sound of a collision, clashing metal, and a grunt of pain. Naruto would have caught Zabuza's wrist just as he had swung the giant executioner's blade to sever his head from his body. The 24-frame rule would enact. Zabuza would have moved out of turn, his arm locked into a frame. The weight of the massive sword pulling against his frozen muscles would cause a sickening pop. Oh, my arm, you little bastard. Naruto would smirk. You moved out of my order, my rhythm. What a shame. For a demon, you don't seem very strong. Just as Naruto prepared to deliver the finishing blow, a fury of senbon nails would whistle through the fog, striking Zabuza in the neck. As a masked figure would appear, an Anbu from the land of the village hidden in the mist. Naruto's eyes would narrow. Someone's stealing my kill. It's a very dangerous thing to do to someone as strong as me. Naruto scowled at the Anbu member. Kakashi would hold his arm out as Haku would bow slightly, grabbing Zabuza's corpse and moving away instantly. The immediate danger, and with it, the tension, had now passed. Naruto would simply stand in the cloud, his bloodlust unsatisfied. He would turn looking to Sasuke, who was trembling, not from fear, but from the realization of the sheer gap between the two. Don't look so pathetic, Sasuke. There's still a chance, after all, for you to awaken that pathetic pink-eyed dijutsu of yours. Sasuke could only stand there, stunned. What could he say? Naruto had overpowered an opponent that was on the same level to him as Kakashi. He felt utterly defeated. And luckily, Kakashi this time didn't even have to use his shonen gun. So he was still perfectly ready for combat. The next week, while they continued to guard Tazuna in preparation for the bridge construction, would include Kakashi training the three of them. Although Naruto doubted there was anything he could teach him that he hadn't already learned, he would be surprised. Their focus was chakra control, not combat. Sakura and Sasuke would spend every hour for the next couple days trying to walk on trees, while Naruto would have gotten it rather quickly, due to his intense amount of training in order to master his Kikagenkai, which required a good amount of chakra control for application. Instead, he would be practicing on water walking, a bit more complicated version of the tree walking exercise. He had stumbled a bit, but was now just about getting the hang of it after about 3 days. However, due to Naruto's nature as a prodigy, he would unfortunately never meet home. Haku, like he had in canon, never working himself hard enough to pass out unconscious in the forest. And so the two would never have come into contact before the final confrontation. As Team 7 guided Tazuna to today's work, the fog would roll out, and standing like a ghost in the mist would be Zabuza, alive and well, and at his side, the hunter Anbu ninja from before, Haku. I've recovered, brat, and this time I won't even let you touch me. Haku, take care of the boy. He'd push his sidekick over. Haku would bow, looking to his master, as his lifeless mask eyes would follow Naruto. As Naruto would be ready to accept this challenge, Haku would remove their mask, throwing it to the side. Naruto would whistle. Wow. Haku, is it? You sure have a pretty face for a ninja tool. It's a waste, really. In my clan, someone like you would be, well, useful in other ways. But since you're in my way, I guess I'll have to break you. Haku would speak calmly. I do not wish to kill you, but I will protect Zabuza's dream. The sound of the ice mirrors rising would crackle and shatter in the air. Haku's secret jutsu, his own Kekagenkai, the crystal demon ice mirrors. Naruto and a frustrated Sasuke, who had jumped in, would be surrounded by a dome of frozen glass. Similar to the panels that Naruto's jutsu created, he'd be surprised feeling the icy cold air surrounding them. Haku merging into the reflections and moving at the speed that defied the human eye. Sasuke would grit his teeth. He's too fast. I can't track him. Too fast, Sasuke. You really are a disappointment. He's just moving in a straight line between these mirrors. It's so basic. Suddenly, hundreds of senbon needles would come, whistling through the air. Sasuke would cry out in pain as the needles found their way into his flesh. But Naruto hadn't moved at all. Or rather, he had moved exactly enough. He'd split his movements into 24 frames, tilting his head, twitching his shoulder, moving his back. You're late, Haku. The sound of a sharp thud would occur as Naruto would catch a needle midair between two of his fingers. How? Haku would be shocked. You shouldn't be able to see me. I don't need to see you. I've already decided where you're going to be. Naruto would turn as he blitzed towards an ice mirror, throwing a hammer of a punch. The pure momentum from his prescribed punch would cause the mirror to shatter into a fine dust. He'd drag Haku out of the frame he created by his throat. Haku would gasp for air, desperate to get away from Naruto's tightened fingers wrapped around his throat. You might be fast, but you're just so predictable. He'd tie in his fist. Haku's face began to turn a light purple. And that is why you're nothing more but a mere tool. Outside of the ice mirror jutsu, we'd see the battle reaching its climax between Zabuza and Kakashi. Zabuza's body bleeding out onto the bridge, laying there still. He had been betrayed by his employer Gato. But Naruto didn't even care. He'd laugh as Haku would cry out, begging him to allow him to go to his master, as Naruto would snap Haku's neck and toss the boy to Zabuza's side. Kakashi would retrieve his Reikiri from Zabuza's chest, ripping it out with a nasty chunking sound, as blood would spill across the bridge. Even with a broken neck, Haku clung to life. Watching as Gato and the other scumbags who had betrayed Zabuza, who had betrayed him, would laugh seeing their two tools disposed of. Tears would flow from Haku. Haku for his now-gone master. Naruto would scoff. Pathetic. A shinobi crying. My grandfather would have him executed for such weakness. In a gurgling scream, with the last of his strength, Haku would annihilate the remaining mafia members, including Gato. As snow would fall over the land of waves, the two shinobi would fall into a pool of their own blood. And with that, Team 7 would return to the Leaf Village. But instead of heading to the Hokage's office to report with the rest of his team, Naruto would make a beeline straight for the Xenian district, a walled estate within the village that felt like an entire fortress, the Xenian compound. The Xenian guards would bow, welcoming him back. Welcome, young Master Naruto. But Naruto would ignore them, walking past into the training courtyard, where his younger cousins were sweating through drills. He himself had worked these very same drills since he was a child. He made his way back to the inner sanctum, where sat in luxurious battle attire, sat in Nabito Zenin, drinking high-grade sake. His eyes would be half closed. You're back. I heard you played with a mist swordsman. I'm pleased to see you didn't embarrass us. Naruto would smirk, now sitting across from him, uninvited. I broke him, grandfather. And I broke his little pet, too. Though the kid did have a pretty interesting ice release jutsu. Oh, and get this. That Uchiha kid spent the whole time watching my back. Man, he was so pathetic. Good. The Uchiha are a dying spark of embers. We are the future. I guess those Hyuga might be our only competition left, huh? Well, don't get cocky. The Chunin exams are starting, and I hear the Cage brats are coming from the Sand Village. He'd his own grandson. I hear the one with the gourd has a temper even nastier than yours. Sand. Let him come. I bet they move way too slowly to even be a threat. Maybe I'll bury the kid in his own gourd. Navito would smirk, half chuckling, as the Chunin exams would begin. The same meeting with Kakashi and Team 7 would happen, with both Sasuke and Naruto pushing to participate. Sasuke was desperate. He needed to awaken his Sharingan, and he had to get stronger. And Naruto was, well, looking for a challenge from the Cage's kid. Who was stronger? Him or me? As they get past the older Chunin, who had been using a genjutsu to hide the exam room, Naruto would walk through the hall. The crowd parting before him and Sasuke. Move. You're blocking the air. Lee would step out now into the hall. You are Naruto Zenin. I wish to test my hard work against your genius. You are the greatest genin from your year. Your cousin has told me how strong you are. I wish to test my strength against yours. Naruto would awkwardly look Lee up and down, his eyes lingering on his green spandex. You. Are you sure you're not just here as a mascot, maybe? Tell me, do you even have a technique? Or do you just hit things until your knuckles bleed? Hence the bandages. I have my taijutsu. Oh, your taijutsu, huh? Naruto would say. The air would crack, and with a sudden zip, Naruto would be directly behind Lee, tapping him on the shoulder. I could have ended you 12 times in the last second. Don't waste my time. Lee's eyes would widen. As he'd turn, ready to throw a punch at Naruto, Mike Guy would fly into the room. Lee, what are you doing, Lee? Don't attack other participants until the exams start. But Gai-sensei, he was mocking our honored battle uniform and my taijutsu. Lee, you don't get it, Lee. Show him your strength with the power of youth. That's the only way, Lee, for you to overcome a true genius. Guy would turn and bow to Naruto deeply. I look forward to seeing you both participate in the exams this year. Please give it everything you've got. Lee would bow too, asking the same. Naruto would simply click his tongue and walk into the exam room, ignoring both of them. Sakura would turn to both of them, apologizing for Naruto, as Sasuke and her would now walk into the room, following him. As Naruto kicked the door open, eyes from all across the room would draw to him. Naruto would speak loudly. Listen up, you trash from the lesser villages. My name is Naruto Zenin, and I'm the next head of this village. I'm the reason most of you are going to fail. And if you can't catch up to me, don't even bother taking the test. You might as well save me the stepping stone to my glory. Sasuke would face palm and mutter under his breath, you're going to get us all killed before the test even starts. Moron. Naruto would grin. Only if they're fast enough to catch me, Sasuke. And we both know they aren't. Naruto would take his seat, leaning back and slamming his feet on the desk, a grin covering his face as Ibiki would walk in. The tuning exams finally starting. As the first test would begin, Naruto would be sat next to the princess of the Hyuga clan. How lucky he'd think. She was at least cute. He'd remember, though, to an uncomfortable memory from when he was much younger, when he was maybe 3 or 4. And the villagers still harassed him for the Ninetales attack. He remembered a very snowy night, one where he had been unaccompanied by guards. We'd see a flash of a Naruto as a child being all beat up as 3 older boys walk away, while Hinata shook him, asking him if he was okay. Naruto had turned the thought away. I was so weak. Not at all, Hinata would say. He was staring at her. Huh. Oh, it's nothing, Hinata. I was just admiring you. She'd blush lightly. Oh, nothing. Naruto, who had gone through vigorous training inside his clan and had the best education since birth, would easily pass the tuning exam test. He didn't even need to cheat, though he could. He thought about 12 different ways he could use projection style to easily move faster than any of the proctors could think. Check their exams and get the answers right. But he didn't need to. It was simply that mundane. Finally, it was time for the Forest of Death. Naruto had gotten a good look at that red-haired kid. Since this Naruto wasn't particularly close with Konohamaru, he hadn't actually run into the sand trio before the exam. He was now keeping his eye on him the entire time the exam was being explained for the second half, including the part about the scrolls. Yeah, get on with it, Naruto would say, completely ignoring Anko. What was that, you shitty brat? Anko would say. She'd seemingly teleport for everyone else, but Naruto was prepared as she grabbed his wrist. He'd grit his teeth. A weak woman like you shouldn't touch me. Then maybe try to listen a bit more carefully to my instructions. She'd roughly let go of his arm as Naruto would caress his wrist. Bitch. The exam would begin, and everything continues pretty normally, all the way until we finally encounter Orochimaru. A gust of wind would cause the trees to groan in the massive forest, and a snapping sound. Suddenly, the atmosphere would shift. The air became thick, not with mist, but with a paralyzing intent to kill. And a giant snake the size of a house would burst from the undergrowth, ripping through the tree line, and atop its head stood a figure with pale skin and eyes that belonged to a reptile. His voice was like sandpaper on silk. My, what a delicious collection of genes we have here. Anachiha. His eyes would glaze over Sasuke. Oh, and a Zenin who carries the 4th Hokage's bloodline. That must mean you're in Uzumaki as well. Such high chakra reserves your kind have. Naruto's fists would tie in. For the record, I'm a pure Zenin. And you've got a lot of nerves, Snake. Blocking the path of me is a capital offense, you know. Even though you're all the way over there, your breath's worse than the bridge builders. Sakura's knees would be shaking, her lungs gasping for air. Naruto, we need to run. This guy is a monster. Sasuke would be frozen, a kunai trembling in his hand. I can't move. Naruto would glance back, his voice dripping with disdain. Pathetic, both of you. If you can't move in this, my grandfather would have slaughtered you. You're just clutter. How about you both stand and watch? A master at work. Naruto's feet would hit the ground. Tap, tap, tap. He didn't wait or weave signs. His engaged mind now focused purely on combat. Cutting the moment into 24 sections, the snake lunges. Frame 12, your tongue flickers out. And 24, you're already out of my sink. The sound of a sharp crack would rip through the air as his body would be displaced. He vanished. He didn't flicker. He simply took a new coordinate through space as he appeared at the bridge of the ginormous snake's nose, his palm resting flat against the scales. Oh, projection sorcery. You've inherited Nabito's speed. I see. I didn't just inherit it. This is perfection. The entire massive snake's body would make a loud, heavy, metallic thud, as its entire body would turn rigid like a statue. The massive summon, though, would use a ton of chakra. Naruto would even feel it a bit, even though he was half Uzumaki. Caught midway through a powerful lunge, the snake would turn from 2D back into a 3D world, moved out. From its instance of frozen time, Orochimaru would leap into the air, his summon having been neutralized. Fascinating. To freeze a creature of this size, your chakra reserves are truly monstrous. Or is it merely the Ninetales? Naruto's ears would burn, his face turning red. Shut it. Naruto's fists would make the sounds of a Gatling gun. Bam, 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 as he unleashed a flurry of strikes. Each hit was like a rocket. Every time Orochimaru tried to block, his fists would be a fraction faster, forcing Orochimaru to lag behind in the fight. He'd grunt, his neck extending like a whip to avoid a blow to his head. You're fast, but you're arrogant. His hand would turn into a swarm of snakes. Naruto's prediction for his own body would be stopped as one of the snakes grips onto his leg. Naruto would be frozen in time by his own technique as Naruto's snakes would wrap around Naruto, squeezing and throwing him to a tree. Naruto would cough out blood, being caught off guard by this unorthodox attack. Naruto would move again like a blood blur, dicing the snakes with his hands filled with kunai as the snakes would be turned into a bloody mist. He'd land gracefully onto another tree branch, looking down at Orochimaru. My grandfather told me about you. You must be a traitor to the Leaf Village if you're this strong. And using snakes. With a summoning contract, you must be one of the Sannin. Orochimaru, you're the failure who couldn't beat my old man to become the Hokage. Isn't that right? Honestly, the legends written about you must have been written by people who are a little slow. You're so sluggish and predictable. Though I guess right now you are taking the shape of a woman. Orochimaru would cackle. And there it is, the overconfident brashness of a brute of the Zenin. The same that's led this village to ruin. Well, I was going to take the Uchiha's body, but your Kekkei might prove useful. Why not? His neck would extend with an impossible speed, his fangs bearing for Naruto's throat to embed him with the curse mark. Naruto's eyes would turn cold as ice. Don't touch me with your filthy teeth. The air would crack as the sound of a sonic boom, as Naruto would move in a straight line. He didn't dodge, he moved through the attack, striking Orochimaru square in the chest with a palm thrust as he activated Wind Gale Palm. The impact was so precise it would send a shockwave through the Sannin's internal organs. But he had missed. Orochimaru's body would turn into hundreds of black tendrils, snakes that would carpet the forest floor, lunging towards him and Sasuke. His eyes would dart, Naruto trying to find a focal point to activate his technique, but there were just too many of them. Damn it! There's no rhythm to his movement. The sound of the snakes hissing would throw Naruto off, as a pale hand would erupt from the earth beneath Naruto's feet, grabbing his ankle with the strength of a vice grip. What? Orochimaru would whisper from the shadows. You're so focused on the next second that you've ignored the present. This is what I call a lack of combat experience. Naruto would yelp out in pain as Orochimaru would shatter his leg and throw him into a massive tree, the wood splintering and tearing the Zenin crest on his back. The impact was massive. Naruto had been slammed so hard his solar plexus was now impacted. He could barely breathe, as a ragged gasp would escape him. For the first time, he felt a bone snap. He felt like a dying lamp as he tried to escape. Naruto's vision would swim before him. He was barely clinging to consciousness in front of the Sannin. Blood would trickle from his mouth. Orochimaru would bite down on him as Naruto would feel the curse mark's chakra implanted on his neck. Naruto would slump over as Orochimaru would turn his eyes to his next prey, the Uchiha brat. Sasuke would not fare much better. Although, seeing Naruto getting taken down by Orochimaru had lit a fire in him, and he was fighting with everything he had. This was his chance to prove himself. This burning passion, seeing his teammate getting taken down, someone as strong and confident as Naruto, had lit something inside him. It even had helped him awaken the one to Mo Sharingan. Finally, as Sasuke was pinned down by Orochimaru, after an impressive display of wires and kunai, Sakura would scream out, saying, "No, no, Sasuke." But it was too late. Sasuke would be bitten with the curse mark. As he'd feel the chakra flowing through him, he too would fall in contact. But as if almost on cue, a low guttural growl would vibrate across the tree. Deep within Naruto's dark unconsciousness, something answered. Something furious. It wasn't the refined chakra that he had honed over years. It was hot, bubbling, and powerful. This hatred was not his own. His voice would rumble. "Get your hands off me." He'd rip out of the jutsu Orochimaru had cast, binding him to the tree. Boom! Red chakra would spill all over his body, clearly visible as the one-tailed cloak would overwhelm him. A pillar of crimson light bursting from his abdomen. He'd shred snakes, blasting Orochimaru back as the curse mark on his neck would burn away. Naruto's eyes, which had been a piercing blue, bled into slit pupils and turned red. His whisker marks thickening and becoming jagged black scars. Orochimaru's eyes would widen. There it is. There's the nine-tailed fox. This was raw, pure violence. Naruto's using pure power would move not with the grace of a master who had perfected his skill over years, but blurring like an animal on the hunt, ready to pounce and chase its prey. With the sound of a heavy smash, Naruto would appear in front of Orochimaru, his hand covered in chakra, and his fingernails extending into claws. He'd shove the Saiyan's face full of dirt and his sharp nails, causing a crater as blood would spurt from Orochimaru's face. The red chakra would protect him from any recoil. The bubbling cloak of the one tails now turning into two tails as Naruto's voice would distort. "You wanted to see it, right? My power. This is what I am. Why all of you hate me? Fine, I'll give it to you. I'll destroy everything." Orochimaru realized the time for games was over as he used a six-trigram seal, casting as he slammed his fingers into Naruto's belly, causing the Nine-Tails chakra to dissipate, and sending Naruto flying off the tree to the forest floor below, completely unconscious. As Sakura would run over carrying Sasuke, she'd look worried for once. "Did you see that?" He'd cough up a little blood. "I even made a Sannin run from me." He collapsed. The toll on his body was too great. The perfect Zenin heir now lay in dirt, covered in burns from the very power he had spent his entire life rejecting. The fact that he was the son of the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, that the night she had died he had had it transferred to him, and the truth of it all, it was a secret among their clan. That in order to weaken the Uchiha's power in the village, Minato had released the Nine-Tails on Kushina. With their ability to control the tailed beasts with their Sharingan, they had used it to destroy the village, and push the Uchiha out of being the greatest clan in the village, making the Zenin the most powerful. That was how Minato had become the fourth Hokage. It had actually been a debate between him and Fugaku Uchiha. But as a ploy, when his wife's pregnancy had led to the Ninetales seal being weakened. He would have taken advantage of her and used the Ninetales to wreak havoc, causing Fugaku to be suspect of causing the disaster in a plan to overthrow the Leaf Village. Before he blacked out, Naruto would remember the conversation between his father and grandfather that he had heard when he was 4 years old, the night he had received that fox mask. The two had been talking about this very secret behind closed doors. And Naruto had never spoken a word of it to anyone. Not the fact that he was actually the Ninetales host, not the fact that his mother had been killed by his own father's hands, or the fact that the Uchiha had been framed, and that Itachi Uchiha had been acting on Minato's orders to wipe out the Uchiha clan. All these thoughts would race in Naruto's mind as he'd finally fall unconscious. Sakura, with all of her might, would drag both the boys with her toward the center tower. They somehow still had both scrolls they had earned, but that was all they had. The entire team was almost wiped out. While Naruto was unconscious and she had almost been taken out, Lee would have saved her, and eventually Sasuke would have even woken up. But he had been covered in black markings, and his chakra was eerie, just like that snake guy from earlier. The Sana Naruto had called him. Sasuke protected them, though, before he too had fallen back unconscious. Now, finally, she would have gone her team to the center tower, both of them laying on 2 bedrolls on the stone floor. Sakura desperately praying that both of them would wake up before the next phase. At the exam. Where is that bastard? Where's the snake? Naruto would wake up, his voice raspy. Naruto, don't move. You drove him off, but Sasuke. She'd turn looking over at Sasuke. Naruto would turn his eyes, narrowing them as he saw the Uchiha unconscious and the mark now on his neck. Naruto would turn looking to his own neck, seeing the raw, boiled skin. He accepted it. How pathetic. Sasuke had allowed that filth into his own blood. Because he was too weak to protect himself. A Zenin should choose to die than to be a vessel for another's power. Naruto's hand moved to touch the raw skin on his neck that had been burned by the Ninetales chakra. The fox had purged the mark, but the hypocrisy of the statement he had said tasted like ash. I'm no better than Sasuke. I'm already a vessel for a piece of trash. The balcony would be crowded with the other teams who had passed as the preliminary rounds would begin. Naruto had already passed his round against Kiba, who had completed at the pairing, saying this was totally unfair. Naruto had blitzed him and Akamaru in a single bout, even though he still felt kind of drained from earlier. Sasuke had helped firm Kakashi, and was able to even reseal that curse mark, taking out his opponent who was from the Sound Village. Finally, it was time for Lee versus Gaara of the Sand. Naruto would watch. He'd mutter to himself, seeing the fight beginning. Look at this guy. No clan or special bloodline, just effort and some weird eyebrows. They're awfully bushy, aren't they? Sakura would bite her tongue. She really wanted to say something to defend Lee since he had actually been the one to save their team. But she was worried Naruto would make fun of her if she said that. A few moments later, after the battle had begun and things had gotten serious, Naruto's eyes would widen, seeing Lee dropping his leg weights, a massive kaboom shaking the entire arena. Naruto's eyes would now really widen. He's moving so fast, purely through his muscles. It's so crude, but it's almost respectable. How much work and training to just mimic a fraction of my birthright, of my speed. What a tragic waste. However, before Naruto's worldview could be completely shattered, Gaara would successfully take out Lee's leg, taking the man of hard work down for good, and having to be saved by a group of Jonin, one of them actually also being a Zenin, who had been proctoring the match. With his speed, they would have successfully blocked Gaara from actually taking out Lee permanently. Naruto would breathe a sigh of relief before correcting himself. No, he's still a commoner. But hey, that fight was actually impressive. It got my heart racing there for a second. Then it was time for the next big match, the battle between Hyugas. It was time for Hinata versus Neji. As the Hyuga genius Neji began to systematically dismantle her, Naruto's composure would begin to fracture. Every time Neji opened his mouth, he'd speak about fate and the burden of being the branch house. A memory, soft, would pierce Naruto's arrogant facade, the facade that had agreed with Neji for everything he had said. We'd see a flashback, the soft crunch of snow under boots, and the cruel laughter of three older boys. He remembered. He remembered back when he was 4.5, long before he had understood the full weight of what it meant to be him. To be the heir to the hokage. He had seen a girl with lavender eyes and beautiful hair. He had always thought she was rather pretty, and he didn't know who she was, but she had been cornered. He didn't think about status or even care. His gut instinct was to charge in with the red scarf that he had wrapped around his neck, flying around him. As the child, Naruto screamed to leave her alone before getting his face bruised up by the three bigger boys. Back to the present, Naruto will be gripping the railing, his knuckles white. Neji's right. The weak deserve to be trampled. The branch serves the head. It's the way of my clan too. So why? Why do I feel such hatred for that little bastard? Naruto's eyes would turn cold as ice, as he couldn't bear to watch anymore. Hinata barely stood, stumbling, but not giving up. Why wouldn't she just give up? As blood trickled from her lips, Naruto would pop as the air around him would crackle. He would catch Neji's fingers. That's enough, Neji. Are you really gonna fight that seriously against a weakling? Hinata would fall to the ground, spitting up blood, as Naruto would have ended the fight. The Jonin would have also arrived, but Naruto had moved even faster than them. Hinata would whisper Naruto before passing on. Conscious. Naruto would throw Neji's hand away, pointing a finger at him, and saying that if he wants to fight someone strong, then he should look forward to their match in the tournament. I'll show your Hyuga clan its place beneath my boot. Neji's eyes would narrow. Fate doesn't change a thing. We'll see whose is stronger, your genius or mine. For what it's worth, Naruto, I heard that you almost died in the forest of death. I had no trouble at all. I suppose we'll find out whose fate is sealed in stone. Yours or mine. Neji would storm off, irritated that this hypocrite had interrupted him. He was interrupting Hyuga clan business. Surely this brat should know better. Naruto didn't feel ashamed though. Instead, he felt conflicted. He had stepped in for Hinata. His chest ached. Yeah, whatever. He'd turn his back away on Hinata as he'd head back to the stands. And with that, the end of the Chunman exams preliminaries would take place, with Naruto versus Neji being announced for the final tournament, happening in 2 months' time. After the preliminary tuning exams, Naruto would return back to the Zenin compound. But the forest of death had left its scars on him. But the Zenin compound was already buzzing. Naruto had returned, but he wasn't the same. He walked through the gates with a bandage tied across his neck. Though not of the curse mark, but of the burn marks of the fox's fire, of its burning chakra, a scar to his own failure. Nabito slammed a cup down the wooden table. You used that beast's power because you couldn't hold your own. What a pathetic showing. Nabito was furious. He stood in the hall, Naruto's eyes cold. I survived, grandfather. I made a Sannin flee from me. Can you tell me of any other 12-year-old in this clan who could say the same? Nabito spat. You survived because of a parasite. The Zenin should rely on their own power. If you cannot dominate the world with your power alone, you're no better than the common trash outside our walls. Naruto would smirk, his voice trembling now. Then I'll just have to make my technique stronger, won't I? I'll incorporate the fox's speed into my jutsu. I'll turn a second into an eternity. Naruto turned on his heel. His robes swirled. His arrogance had backfired on him. But at the same time, the power of the Ninetales had been incredible. He was disgusted with himself, but he had never felt more alive than that fight. As Naruto left the compound, he would see a man sneaking into the women's bathhouses down in the main street of Konoha. He'd have long white hair and red markings on his face. Naruto's eyes would widen. This was Jiraiya. Just as the Hyuga clan had their branch family, so too did the Zenin. And in this case, Jiraiya, one of the Sana, just like Orochimaru, happened to have been related to the Zenin clan itself. Though Jiraiya had been cast out, although Naruto did not know why. He looked at Jiraiya's hands. The man was peeping through a wooden hole. On his finger, Naruto saw a very familiar forebearer sigil, the sigil of the Zenin clan. Yep, no doubt about it. This was the Sannin, the Toad Sage, Jiraiya. Naruto would bark. A Zenin. Here. You look like a disgraced drunk. Jiraiya would turn with a grin, not even a hint of shame. Disgraced, maybe. But drunk is a matter of perspective, kid. You must be Minato's brat. The one who thinks he's a god because he can count to 24. Naruto would snarl. You're a branch member. I can smell your lack of talent. You don't even have our technique. You're a failure. Sharp tongue. Just like Nabito. Tell you what. If you can land just one hit on me, this failure, I'll buy you some ramen. If not, you should shut up and listen for 5 minutes. I'll have you begging for mercy. This was it, Naruto thought. My chance. I couldn't beat Orochimaru because he was a genius, but Jiraiya. The sound of a heavy thud as Naruto's face would slam into the dirt. How? I hit you with my technique. You should have been frozen. Jiraiya would tower over him, his playful look gone. You're always so busy watching time that you've forgotten to watch me. I may not have the clan's gift, but I'm plenty strong in my own right, kid. Naruto stared up, shocked. He had been taught that the Kekkei, their projection style, was everything. But this again broke everything he had thought about. This man was faster than he was, purely with his own physical strength and speed. His prowess was unmatched. Dry would laugh. Tell you what, if you want to try and get stronger, I'll help you. But I won't train with that technique of yours. Seems like you've got down pat already. Instead, he'd summon Gamabunta. What is that? Naruto would be shocked. If you can stand on this guy's head for 24 hours, I'll make you my student. Naruto would be aghast. His student. Our clan's outcast, but well, he was a famous Sannin after all. And so, a month would pass. As Naruto and Jiraiya re-entered the village, Naruto would turn to Jiraiya and bow. This was a huge honor in his mind. Considering that Jiraiya had been considered an outcast and a failure, Naruto had gained some respect for him. Jiraiya would be surprised. He'd wonder if maybe this kid would be different. Maybe the Zenin weren't going to be as horrible as they'd always been, and things could change for the better. Naruto would make his way to the arena, where down below it was finally his turn. The arena was in an uproar. There was an entire section of the arena filled with the Zenin clan, and at the top of it, Nabito. Minato would be sat in the announcer's box alongside the Kaz cage. The Zenin clan would cheer in an egregious roar as Naruto entered into the stands. As Neji did the same, the Hyuga would also respond, both major families cheering their own representative on. This fight was more than just an exam. For them, it was a battle of honor between their two clans. Heck, even Hiyashi was supporting Neji here just to get one over on the Zenin clan, who had always belittled them. And the announcer would count down as the exam would begin. Naruto versus Neji. Naruto's eyes were filled with determination as he faced down Neji Hyuga. Struggle all you want, Zenin, but my Byakugan can see the flow of all of your movements. No matter where you run off to, I have a 360-degree perception of vision. Naruto would smile. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm counting on, actually. Neji would lunge forward, trying to get the move ahead of Naruto before he can activate his technique of projection style. His palms were a blur of gentle fists, but Naruto wouldn't go to use projection sorcery. Instead, before Neji can reach him, he'd bite his thumb and slam it into the ground using the toad summoning jutsu. But he wasn't summoning Gamabunta. No, instead, Naruto summoned 24 individual frogs. These were smaller, much younger ones, and he kept them an equidistant distance from Neji. With this, it was time for his warm-up. Naruto would jump into the air, loosening all his limbs as he throws his arms back and forth. Just like that, a crack would rip through the air as Neji prepared, spinning into his circle defense, hoping to catch Naruto in it. But Naruto wasn't attacking Neji. No. The crowd would watch in amazement as Naruto leaped between all 24 frogs so quickly. As each frog was touched by Naruto, they would leap upward, making a gecko sound as soon as he touched them, throwing him up into the air where he teleported again back down. Naruto is charging his momentum, building up his speed faster and faster. So, you see, a little known fact about projection sorcery is its ability to change its base speed from its first 24 seconds. Which means that the faster and longer you've been using the technique, the more speed you compound. Naruto would be building up speed using the toads to reach a point of speed faster than Neji can react, to where Naruto could reach into the rotational defense easily. The rotational ball of chakra Neji was wielding would falter as Naruto would appear his fist in Neji's side. Neji's hands and legs having missed Naruto completely. See, Neji. As long as you're moving slower than me, it's like you're spinning in slow motion. Just a target. Neji would cough blood as he gets sent sprawling across the arena into a large thump of smoke and dust. The Hyuga would cheer out in outrage, while the Zeni would roar in glory. Naruto wouldn't go after Neji here, letting him recover. As Hinata watches, she'd clutch her wrists, thinking, Naruto, Neji. Neji would wipe his face. Oh, I was certain you were the type to kick me while I was down. I guess you have some respect after all. Naruto would smile. I need to give our families a good show. It wouldn't do well for you to get taken out in the first blow. Neji would grit his teeth. Naruto was making him a show for the clans. He was making sport of him. Naruto would step forward as Neji would be within range. He'd activate his 8 trigrams, 64 palms, trying to strike Naruto. Naruto would easily dodge every strike. Too slow. You're just too damn slow. When Neji finally ran out of steam, Naruto would smile. My turn. 8 trigram, 64 palms. Naruto would copy what Neji had done, following his own movements and using projection sorcery to mimic his speed. Of course, without the Byakugan, it wasn't like he was actually deactivating Neji's chakra. Points. Really, it was just to show him that anything you can do, I can do. As Naruto whipped his fist fast like a tornado, Neji's body would get ricocheted around as he finally would get kicked, spinning into a stone wall and causing a crater within it, where he'd fall to the ground completely. Knocked out. There would be outcries of rage and glory as the Zenin would roar out in their victory. The announcer would announce Naruto Zenin as the winner. The Hyuga, who had been known to be untouchable in his year, had just been outpaced by the next year's strongest. After that came the fight between Sasuke and Gaara, and it seemed Kakashi didn't pull any punches when training Sasuke this time. Sasuke's Chidori was mastered to the point that he had in the original timeline, and his Sharingan shone with 3 Tamo. He would shred through Gaara's sand defense like paper, cutting and causing him pain. And just as the story goes, the One-Tails would rage inside him. Though our Naruto would not beg for Sasuke's match to end. He was too busy being disgusted by this power Gaara was using. How unsightly? Naruto felt the chakra grating into his skin. It reminded him of his own dance of death, where he had almost been taken by Orochimaru, if it wasn't for that fox's power. Gaara would rage as the pain burned him. It hurts, it hurts, it hurts. And just like that, he'd enter into the pseudo-one-tailed state, bursting out of the arena, and heading off into the forest. Sasuke would give chase. As all hell broke loose, a genjutsu would be cast over the arena, causing even the average shinobi to fall asleep. The great clans, such as the Hyuga and the Zenin, were completely impervious to such jutsu. And the war would begin. as Orochimaru would reveal himself as the Hokage, attacking Minato. As the fourth Hokage would battle the fake Hokage, Naruto would give chase after Sasuke and Gaara, along with a few other shinobi from their year. As Naruto gave chase, he'd eventually catch up, seeing Sasuke running out of energy, and his sharing gun flickering back to black. He'd be impressed. Sasuke was able to keep up with this guy, huh? Maybe he's not as weak as I thought after all. But Naruto's tongue would soon be caught by its own words. As the fight would switch between Sasuke and Gaara to Gaara and Naruto, Naruto would quickly realize that this wasn't going to be easy. Gaara's sand was not treated as a part of his body by projection sorcery. It was a separate entity in its entirety. It took way more processing power for Naruto to fight this guy. He couldn't freeze the sand by calculating its trajectory. It was far too small for him to count every single grain. And Gaara, if he fought smartly, had more range than him. And Naruto can't freeze Gaara unless he has physical contact with him. He had too close this distance, but all the sand bullets and long-range attacks were preventing Naruto from reaching him. Even when he had and finally touched his sand arm, just as how Zabuza's sword had been treated as a separate part than his body, so too did the sand be treated separately from Gaara. Naruto would get a nasty gash across his chest as blood would flow through his robes. He'd get sent sprawling back down to the forest floor. Naruto would wipe his face, picking himself back up as he was ready to jump back into the fray. Meanwhile, back at the village, Minato was now trapped in the four-way barrier jutsu. The same jutsu that the Sound Four had originally used to trap Hiruzen. Orochimaru in this case, though, was targeting the current Hokage, not the third. With his mastery over projection style, Minato would easily be outpacing Orochimaru. That is, until he'd used the reanimation jutsu, summoning the second and the first Hokage. Members of the strongest clan in Konoha's history, the Senju. Oh, you think adding more numbers will mean you can beat me, Orochimaru? Minato would smirk confidently. He'd hold his hand out as blue energy would begin to spiral around it. The deep blue energy would rock the air, spiraling in his hand, and Minato would confidently grin. Come on, Lord First. Let's see who's as stronger. Your pathetic sage jutsu would style or my Rasengan. In a battle of pure speed, Minato had the advantage. With projection-style sorcery, and now the Rasengan, he was able to gain a tremendous amount of momentum. The Rasengan getting even charged by this momentum, and making it more powerful. He'd rip through the wood-style jutsu and water dragons of the first and second Hokage, reaching Orochimaru and blasting him in the chest. With a Rasengan, Orochimaru would bellow in pain, trying to have transferred to a snake, but getting hit mid-transformation. His body would freeze into a panel-firm projection style, and then be bashed again by the Rasengan, shattering him into pieces. He gets sent sprawling as the two Kage would lurch to his side, marionettes to attack the fourth. Minato would grin even more confidently. Yeah, that's it. Now you're really getting my blood boiling. Hirokaimar would wheeze. I didn't think fighting the Black Flash would be so difficult. I see why they named you that as an aura of death. Minato would swoosh back his blonde hair, golden in the light. Yeah, well, you know, that's the reason that so many of them fear me. But she never did. Minato would look down at the Rasengan forming in his hand. That's why I made this, you know. I was terrified of that night. Ninetales' power. He'd think back. He'd remember when his clan had put out a hit on Kushina Uzumaki. His father, Nabito, had been the one to do it. She was originally meant to be taken to the Cloud Village and then executed, putting more stress on the war and bringing the Leaf Village further into the conflict, while also removing a threat for the Hokage position. He had been born to be the Hokage. That was Minato's destiny. But things didn't go according to plan. Minato had followed the assailants, and eventually, after she had gotten pissed off enough, Kushina had ripped them a new one. Her hair spiraling into tails as red chakra covered her, and she had destroyed all of them. Minato had a bright idea at the end, though. He'd smirked to himself. He remembered how he made himself look like a hero, coming out of nowhere, beating down the last assailant, and asking her if she was all right. That meathead didn't even suspect a thing. And after all those years, I was finally able to create an imitation of the tailed beast power. The ultimate destructive jutsu of the tailed beast bomb. My Rasengan. Orochimaru laughed. Yes, and an impressive rank jutsu it is. But you never could complete it, could you? I heard from Jiraiya. That old man's telling you stories then, huh? Yes, Minato. He told me how you came to him begging to learn sage jutsu, how in exchange you offered him the secrets of the Rasengan, and how he learned of its imperfections. That jutsu's only so effective because you're wielding it. I personally would never be interested in such a wasteful jutsu. So much chakra for so little results. Oh yeah. Then how about you come here and I'll give it to you. And the fight would commence once more. Back to Naruto, he was completely out of chakra. Man, Gaara, you are something else. As Naruto's battle spirit would begin to inflame, Sasuke would watch in horror. As he would see the red chakra of the Ninetales, now leaking out once again. Naruto in this timeline would not go to summon Gamabunta. Why would he? This was a test between two men, two shinobi with power. He wanted to win no matter the cost. As Naruto felt that burning power of the fox, he'd push more hatred, more feelings into it, and he'd feel two tails extend behind him. Successfully generating a two-tails, nine-tails cloak. With this, he was able to split 1 second even further, doubling the power of his projection sorcery. Into 1/48 of a second, doubling his speed. He would punch Gaara going Mach 3, as the boy would cry out in pain, trying to wrap sand around Naruto. He was simply too fast. Before the sand could get a grip on him, he was gone, far exceeding the speed of Lee with his gates. As Naruto would rip a claw across Gaara's back, he'd fall unconscious, as the sand would grow around him, transforming Gaara into the full form of the one-tailed tanuki. As if to respond to this, Naruto's body would begin to enter into the three-tailed state. As Naruto would feel his skin ready to burst at the seams, he'd cry out in pain as Sasuke would tell Naruto to stop it, to cut it out. But Naruto was losing control. As he'd grow into the four-tailed state, it was clear he didn't have real mastery over this power. And this is where the history comes into play. Unlike in the original Naruto, this Naruto merely had an 8-trigram seal. He did not possess the Reaper Death Seal, as Minato was clearly still alive. Thus, this dual-layered seal jutsu was only one. The Ninetales' power was much more sloppily transferred to Naruto. Their chakra is not as integrated as the original, causing Naruto to lose control much faster. Since this Naruto has the entire Ninetales stored inside of him, the Ninetales also possesses much more chakra, which explains why Naruto is able to enter the four-tailed state at this point in his life. As he enters four tails, the two-tailed beasts would clash, a giant wave of light overcoming the area as Sasuke would get blown back. Sakura would arrive along with Shikamaru, who would take Sasuke and try and get him out of there. As Naruto's jaw would unhinge, he'd begin casting the tailed beast bomb. In a roar of frustration, the one-tails would shout out to Kurama, screaming the Ninetales' name. As Naruto would blast it with a tailed beast bomb, eradicating everything and blowing off one of Gaara's legs. Gaara would yell out in pain, horrified at the monster in front of him. This was something far beyond what he had been called. This was a real demon. As Naruto was about to kill Gaara, suddenly he'd be frozen in space. This is why I said it's pathetic to rely on that power. I always told Minato we should have killed the beast and been done with it. Naruto's grandfather, Nabito, would arrive, having followed the trio out of the village. Seeing his grandson chasing down the one-tailed Jinchuriki. Making my grandson a Jinchuriki. This is why I can't get along with that son of mine. Nabito would punch the frozen Naruto in the tailed beast state, sending it flying back into a tree and ripping several of them down. The Ninetales would seemingly blitz back into space, but with its simplistic animal-like movements, Nabito was far faster, stronger and more capable. With its next dash, the Ninetales overwhelmed Naruto would get grabbed by the throat, the chakra burning his grandfather's hand. As Nabito would cover his fingers in chakra using a sealing jutsu on top of Minato's 8 trigram seal. Now, once again, sealing the chakra of the Ninetales. He'd pull his hand back, feeling the flesh burning, as he'd watch as Naruto would fall to the ground. His skin covered in bruises and blood. The Ninetales chakra slowly healing him from his own self-caused injuries. Too much effort for an old man. He'd sit back, pulling out his sake and taking a drink. Gaara would ask why had he saved him? As Namito would laugh. Haha. Save you? No. I came to save this brat. Unconsciously pointing the bottle towards Naruto, who was slumped on the ground. Anyway, he grabbed Naruto, tossing him over his shoulder. He's got some use for me still. And he's not half bad either if he puts his mind to things. At least he tries, unlike that son of mine. I'll choose to think that he still has a chance, even if it is unsightly. With that, he'd walk away, leaving Gaara and his bleeding leg, with Gaara being helped and saved by his siblings later on. Meanwhile, tragedy had struck the Leaf Village. Nabito would hear bustling as everyone would be screaming out, saying that something happened to Lord Hokage. As they got closer, Nabito's eyes would narrow. The village would mourn, seeing Lord Fourth carrying the third Hokage, who had sacrificed his life breaking through the seal barrier to take down his one grave mistake. He had used the Reaper Death Seal to try and take out Orochimaru permanently, and in the process, had taken his own life. Minato would stand, a sad look on his face, but internally, what an idiot. I had Kushina teach me the Reaper Death Seal. And naturally, of course, I talked to Lord Third when he asked. I never thought someone was actually supposed to use such a jutsu. There's no way I would use such a technique. And especially not after I saw Kushina summon that thing to seal the Ninetales in my son. Speaking of which, Minato would look up, seeing his father carrying his son. Hey, old man, what happened to the kid? Oh, you know. Just a bit of rough housing. Nabito would laugh, stroking his beard, as Naruto would begin to stir. What happened? That bastard. Oh, finally up and about, are we, huh? Well, I guess you can walk on your own legs. Then, Namito would put Naruto down. Naruto would turn, seeing his father and Lord Third. The third Hokage had been a close friend of their family, and now he was gone. The village would hold a mourning ceremony for the third Hokage, celebrating his last ounce of life to seal Orochimaru's arms, defanging a great threat to the village in his last moments. What Minato himself, though, didn't expect was how Orochimaru escaped. How had he learned that forbidden jutsu? You see, after Minato had become the Kage, he had outlawed and banned all mention of the Flying Raijin Jutsu, the only known jutsu that had been created by Lord Second to counter the Zenin clan and their own incredible speed. The sealing-type jutsu manipulated spacetime just like their Kekkei. However, it did require more chakra to use and skill. So naturally, Minato was shocked that Orochimaru was able to use the Sound 4 and himself to cast the Flying Raijin Jutsu with their aid, and actually escape him. That was why he had tried so hard to arrest that jutsu from existence. What a pain! Minato was terrified that someone could learn how to use that power effectively. Someone just like Lord Second, Tobirama. In fact, that was the biggest concern and the reason why he fought so cautiously against the reanimations. Knowing this, Minato would try with all of his might to push the village to find and take down Orochimaru. And all under the guise of him avenging the third Hokage. Additionally, Minato would justify the attack as a reason to implicate the Sand Village, forcing the Sand Village under his power, and causing strife between the Land of Wind and the Land of Fire. Over the next couple weeks, tensions would rise politically, and suddenly two strangers would appear in the village, as if though on cue, reacting to the death of Hiruzen. They wore dark robes, and crowned on them a red cloud.